you, Chair. Secretary of State, just want to come back to food standards in the US, and perhaps before I do that, you were asked just a few moments ago about what you saw as the three priorities that UK government has, your department has, really, in negotiating a deal with the US. What do you think of the US? Could you just reiterate, remind us what the US priorities are? Top
well,
three.
You can read the US negotiating objectives, which they put out.
If you could remind us, yeah.
Well, I'm not going to list all of my counterparties' negotiating objectives, but clearly the US want greater access to the UK market, and they want a reduction in barriers. And also the United States want to help more UK businesses sell their fantastic produce in the US. And I would point to our ambassador here, Woody Johnson, the US ambassador here, who is doing a brilliant job at taking British companies and helping them get into the US market.
No, I understand that. It was just
to your point. We will only do a trade deal with the US if it is a win-win. The reason you do trade deals with other countries is to benefit both countries, and I think we can both benefit.
I appreciate that. I just was hoping you'd be a little bit more concise on the three areas, because I understood them really essentially to be agriculture was their lead issue, and then manufactured goods was second, particularly vehicles. And when Woody Johnson says sort of we want a win-win and so on, I think when we're dealing with the US, it's kind of win and kind of do as well as you possibly can against the US. Certainly, that's the recent experience of Canada and Mexico and others. Just to come onto the food standards, given that their priority is about agricultural sector, can I just quote from Penny Mordaunt, Paymaster General, who told the House recently regarding food standards, if people do not want to put their faith in government, we should trust the consumer, is what she said. Now, of course, the consumer can only work on what they're informed and what is put in front of them. You may have seen the recent YouGov poll that said that 80% of the population do not trust or would not wish to see chlorinated chicken here. And I bear in mind that I do take on board the comments that you were making a moment ago. But given that a huge proportion of the food sector in this country is through the food services sector, whether it be into hospitals, to schools, to prisons, and so on, and to the restaurant catering trade, is it not the reality, and this is a view held by the NFU, that a huge proportion of UK agriculture is going to be lost to the US because that sector is going to be swallowed up by US agri-industry?
So first of all, other countries have their negotiating objectives, and they publish their negotiating objectives, and they might communicate those negotiating objectives. That does not mean that we are going to accept them. I will only strike a deal with the US if it is in British interests and protects all of our red lines in the negotiation. I'm very clear about that. And there is no time limit on getting this deal. There is no way that I am going to be bounced into or pressurized into getting an agreement. And many countries, smaller than the UK, have successfully negotiated with the US, including Australia. So I don't buy this argument that that it's a lose for the UK, because we can simply not do the deal if we don't think it's in our interest. On the subject of import standards, the reason that we have the Food Standards Agency, which is a non-ministerial government department, is precisely so we have an independent body that oversees what is safe for British people to eat. And the Food Standards Agency rules are put into law, in this case through the Withdrawal Act. So those bans on chlorinated chicken and hormone beef are in law. And there has frankly been a lot of scaremongering about this, trying to worry British consumers that is going to change. This is not a matter for the Trade Department. This is not something I'm negotiating in any of these trade deals. This is a matter for the Food Standards Agency and for Parliament. I don't think I could be any more clear about that. And I also made very clear in my comments that what I want to see is a good deal for British farmers. if you look at the scoping assessment to which the chairman referred to earlier in this hearing, it is clear that UK agriculture would benefit from a US deal. We have products that people around the world want to buy, and we should be confident in our high standards, our high quality, our high animal welfare. These are products that people around the world respect and want to buy into. We have become a net dairy exporter for the first time in many years, just in the last year, because people want to buy what we have to offer. So let's have a bit of self-confidence rather than assuming that British consumers are going to turn their backs on British products. I simply don't think that's true.
But to go back to the Paymaster General's point about trusting the consumer, if I was to, I don't know, have a steak or a chicken dish, chicken Kiev, whatever it might be in Wetherspoons, how would I know that that was actually a UK-produced chicken or piece of beef to our high standards, or whether it came from the US?
Well, what you would know is whatever that piece of beef, wherever it was from, that would have to comply with UK import standards. And I've been very clear about what those UK import standards are. Now, do I think there is a further role for labelling internationally? I certainly do. I've always been a big supporter of country of origin labelling. I'm going to be working towards that at the World Trade Organization, because I think it's important that consumers have information about where their food comes from. I think that is extremely helpful. But what I don't want to do is just let this point pass that somehow people will be eating products that are deemed not suitable for consumption by the Food Standards Agency. That simply isn't true. We won't be allowing products into Britain that aren't deemed by the Food Standards Agency to be safe.
So you're saying that on the menu card in Wetherspoons, it will have details of it being a US sourced piece of beef?
Well, this is all extremely hypothetical.
No, but it's important. That service sector is a huge part of the industry.
Well, what I'm saying is I support country of origin labelling, and I want to work internationally to achieve that. And certainly in any trade deals we strike, that is precisely the type of information we will be looking for consumers. But it's a fundamental point of principle, Mr. Weston, that every piece of food sold in this country has to be safe and cannot violate the rules laid out by the Food Standards Agency.
But to be honest, it doesn't sound like it's really going to happen, is it? And the US have actually put on record they will not accept any form of labelling.
Lots of countries set out lots of negotiating strategies in public. What happens in negotiating room is that we will be pressing British interests.